Welcome back to the Hydrogen Studies podcast. Last episode, we gave an overview of molecular hydrogen and the function of kidneys. Today, we're diving even deeper into the support molecular hydrogen can play in the event of kidney failure. Let's start from the ground up. This is the Hydrogen Studies podcast, sponsored by Echo Water. Chronic kidney disease, often shortened to CKD, isn't something that happens all at once. It's a gradual, often silent process in which kidney function steadily declines. According to a 2020 review by Dr. Amirati, CKD is typically asymptomatic in its early stages, which means most people don't realize they have it until the damage is already advanced. By the time symptoms appear, things like fatigue, fluid retention, changes in urine output, or abnormal lab values like elevated creatinine or urea, the kidneys may have already lost more than half of their filtering capacity. This slow progression makes CKD especially dangerous. It often goes unnoticed until it's difficult to reverse. The kidneys are incredibly dynamic organs. Their primary role is to filter the blood, removing metabolic waste, excess fluids, and toxins. But that's just the beginning. They also help regulate blood pressure by managing sodium and water balance, produce erythropoietin, a hormone that stimulates red blood cell production, balance electrolytes like potassium, calcium, and phosphate, and activate vitamin D for bone health. What makes kidneys particularly vulnerable to damage is how metabolically demanding their job is. They filter about 180 liters of blood per day, reabsorb nutrients, and constantly adapt to changes in hydration, diet, and blood chemistry. This means they're always on, which leaves them highly exposed to stress, especially at the microscopic cellular level. One of the key challenges in CKD is ongoing exposure to damaging stressors like hypertension, high blood pressure, which increases the pressure inside the glomeruli, the filtering units, and causes structural damage over time. Diabetes, where high blood sugar and metabolic byproducts damage small blood vessels and kidney cells. Or chronic inflammation, which disrupts repair processes and promotes fibrosis. As this stress accumulates, the kidneys try to adapt, but when adaptation fails, the result is fibrosis, a buildup of scar tissue that replaces healthy, functional nephrons. Fibrosis doesn't just reflect damage, it locks it in, preventing future repair. Over time, this leads to a feedback loop. Fewer working nephrons means the remaining ones have to work harder. That extra burden creates more stress and more damage. Eventually, the kidney reaches a tipping point where function can no longer be maintained, and patients progress toward end-stage kidney disease, which often requires dialysis or transplantation. While medications can help slow this decline, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Treatment often depends on the underlying cause, whether it's diabetes, high blood pressure, or autoimmune disease, but all of them share a common problem. The kidneys are trying to repair themselves under constant stress, and their ability to do so diminishes over time. This is where newer research is starting to focus, not just on controlling symptoms or risk factors, but on supporting the kidney's internal environment, especially in areas like oxidative stress, inflammation, and mitochondrial function. That sets the stage for the segments that follow, where we explore how hydrogen might play a role, not as a cure, but as a potential support in managing some of these underlying processes. But first, a word from our sponsor. Your body is a system, and when it's running right, you feel focused, energized, in flow. But sometimes we struggle to find that flow state. Why? Because there's too much static in our system. Brain fog, fatigue, and inflammation. The Echo Flask clears the static by infusing your water with molecular hydrogen, a natural, science-backed gas that helps your body think sharper, recover faster, and run smoother. This is more than hydration. It's better focus, more energy, faster recovery, less internal stress, and long-term benefits that keep you sharp. When your water works harder, your whole system does too. Find your flow state with the Echo Flask hydrogen water bottle and get an unlimited supply of hydrogen water at home and on the go. Visit echowater.com and use code H2Studies to get 10% off of your first order with Echo Hydrogen Water products. To understand why chronic kidney disease progresses the way it does, we have to zoom in, down to the level of the cell. In their 2020 review published in Cells, Ho and Shirakawa explore how oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction work together to drive kidney damage over time. This isn't just a side effect of CKD, it's part of the engine behind it. Let's break that down. Oxidative stress happens when there's an imbalance between free radicals, unstable molecules called reactive oxygen species, or ROS, and the body's ability to neutralize them with antioxidants. At low levels, ROS actually play a helpful role in signaling an immune response, but when they build up unchecked, they begin to damage cell membranes, proteins, and DNA. The kidneys, with their high metabolic demand, are especially exposed. Cells in the renal tubules and glomeruli work hard to reabsorb nutrients and regulate fluid balance, and that workload generates ROS as a byproduct. When these cells are already stressed by high blood pressure, diabetes, or toxins, their antioxidant defenses weaken. That's when oxidative stress takes over. But here's where it gets more complex. Mitochondria, the energy-producing structures in cells, are both sources and targets of oxidative stress. According to Ho and Shirakawa, mitochondrial dysfunction is central to the progression of CKD. When mitochondria are damaged by ROS, they start leaking even more ROS themselves. This creates a vicious cycle. Damaged mitochondria produce more oxidative stress, which causes more mitochondrial damage. Energy production drops. Kidney cells, which rely on a steady energy supply to maintain filtration, signaling, and reabsorption, begin to fail. This mitochondrial burnout doesn't just cause fatigue at the organ level, it also impairs autophagy, the cell's internal cleanup process, triggers inflammatory signaling, activating pathways like NF-κB, promotes fibrosis, the irreversible scarring that hardens kidney tissue. One of the most striking points in the review is that this damage can occur even before noticeable symptoms or lab changes appear. That's part of what makes CKD so hard to detect early. You might have normal-looking lab results while your cells are already battling oxidative injury. The authors also highlight the interconnectedness of oxidative stress and inflammation. These aren't separate problems, they amplify each other. As inflammation rises, more immune cells arrive at the kidneys, generating additional ROS and inflammatory cytokines. That, in turn, worsens mitochondrial damage. It's a self-reinforcing loop that quietly drives disease forward. Importantly, conventional therapies don't always address these cellular stress pathways directly. Blood pressure medications, blood sugar control, and dialysis all manage symptoms or slow progression. But the underlying oxidative burden and energy collapse at the cellular level often remain unaddressed. That's why recent research is starting to look for interventions that don't just manage lab numbers, but also help cells cope with stress and maintain function. One of the tools being studied in this context is molecular hydrogen, which we'll discuss shortly, not as a replacement for medical care, but as a possible way to support these deeper processes, especially in cells that are overwhelmed by ROS and low on energy. While reviews help us understand the big picture, it's animal models that allow researchers to test specific interventions, like hydrogen, in controlled settings. One particularly useful model for studying kidney damage is called unilateral ureteral obstruction, or UUO. In this model, scientists block one of the two ureters, the tubes that carry urine from the kidneys to the bladder, in a rat. The resulting backup of pressure causes tubular injury, inflammation, and ultimately fibrosis, mimicking what happens in chronic kidney disease when stress builds in kidney tissue over time. In a 2022 study published in Pediatric Research, Mizutani and colleagues used this model to explore how hydrogen-rich water might affect the progression of kidney damage. Their findings were compelling. Rats that received hydrogen-rich water had significantly lower levels of oxidative stress in their kidneys compared to untreated rats. But it wasn't just a matter of fewer free radicals. The hydrogen group also had less fibrosis, as shown by reduced collagen deposition, lower expression of profibrotic genes, including TGF-B1, a key driver of scarring, and better preservation of kidney structure, including the tubules and interstitial tissue. This matters because fibrosis is what makes kidney damage permanent. Once scar tissue forms, it replaces healthy nephrons and impairs the kidney's ability to filter blood. The fact that hydrogen-rich water helped reduce fibrosis suggests that it may interrupt the chain of damage before it becomes irreversible. This study also observed changes in inflammatory signaling. Hydrogen appeared to suppress cytokines and chemokines involved in immune cell recruitment and tissue injury. Again, we're seeing a pattern. Hydrogen is not acting as a blunt anti-inflammatory. It seems to modulate the stress response, toning down damaging activity without blocking necessary repair mechanisms. What makes these findings especially interesting is that the rats still had ureteral obstruction, meaning the underlying cause of damage was still present. The hydrogen didn't remove the source of stress, it helped the tissue tolerate that stress more effectively. This gives us a potential clue into how hydrogen might be useful in chronic kidney disease. It's not a fix, but it may act as a kind of cellular buffer, helping kidney tissue stay functional longer, even under ongoing pressure. Of course, it's important to remember this was a rodent study. The dose, delivery method, and disease model don't translate directly to humans. But as a proof of concept, the results are promising. They suggest that hydrogen-rich interventions can influence real biological pathways, oxidative stress, fibrosis, inflammation, that drive CKD progression. And they point to something important, that maybe the kidneys don't need a miracle, they need a bit more resilience. And that's where hydrogen, as a gentle, non-disruptive molecule, might offer something new. So far, we've seen that molecular hydrogen may reduce oxidative stress and slow kidney damage in animal models. But what happens when you test it in real-world clinical settings, especially in patients whose kidneys have already failed? This question led researchers in Japan to design a new kind of hemodialysis, one that delivers molecular hydrogen through the dialysis fluid itself. In traditional hemodialysis, a patient's blood is passed through a filter and returned to the body, removing waste and excess fluid. It's life-saving, but it's also a massive physiological stressor. During and after treatment, patients often experience oxidative stress, inflammation, low blood pressure, and chronic fatigue. Over time, these repeated insults contribute to cardiovascular complications, the leading cause of death in dialysis patients. That's what Nakayama set out to address. In 2 consecutive studies, one published in PLOS One in 2017 and another in Scientific Reports in 2018, the team evaluated a novel approach, infusing the dialysis solution with dissolved hydrogen gas, allowing patients to receive molecular hydrogen passively during each session. The setup was simple but elegant. The hydrogen-enriched fluid circulated through the dialyzer, exposing the patient's blood to hydrogen during each treatment. No pills, no behavioral change, just a subtle shift in the chemical composition of the treatment itself. So what happened? Better blood pressure control. Post-dialysis hypertension improved significantly, allowing for a reduction in the use of antihypertensive medications among those patients receiving hydrogen-enriched dialysate. Lower inflammation. Over time, inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein, or CRP, trended downward in the hydrogen group, suggesting a cumulative anti-inflammatory effect. And improved clinical outcomes. In the 2018 study, the researchers reported that patients treated with hydrogen-enriched dialysis had better overall prognosis, including a lower rate of cardiovascular events. What stands out here is not just the data, but the delivery method. Hydrogen wasn't given as a supplement or drug. It was integrated directly into a routine procedure. No extra burden on the patient, no disruption to their care plan. That's especially important for people on dialysis who already face complex medication regimens and lifestyle limitations. The fact that hydrogen could be delivered passively as part of this therapy itself adds to its appeal as a potential adjunct. Now, it's worth noting that both studies were observational. They weren't randomized controlled trials, and more research is needed to confirm long-term benefits. But still, these are some of the first human data showing that hydrogen might do more than reduce lab markers. It might actually help people feel and function better during one of the most demanding treatments in medicine. It also echoes what we've seen in animals. Hydrogen appears to reduce oxidative load, improve cellular resilience, and blunt inflammation, especially in environments where the body is under chronic stress. In short, the dialysis studies show us a real-world test case. Patients facing the extreme end of kidney disease, receiving hydrogen as part of a standard treatment, and seeing measurable benefits in how their bodies respond. By now, we've seen that molecular hydrogen appears to reduce stress and injury in kidney tissue across both animal models and dialysis patients. But how does a molecule as small and as simple as hydrogen gas actually influence complex diseases like chronic kidney failure? The studies we've discussed give us some clues. Researchers like Ho and Shirakawa have pointed out that oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction are central to how chronic kidney disease progresses. Mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell, produce energy, but they also produce reactive oxygen species as byproducts. In healthy cells, antioxidants keep ROS levels in check, but in kidney disease, the system falls out of balance. Excess ROS damage mitochondria, which then release even more ROS, and this self-amplifying cycle contributes to inflammation, cell death, and fibrosis, all hallmarks of chronic kidney injury. So where does hydrogen come in? Selective antioxidant activity, unlike many antioxidants that neutralize everything, including helpful signaling molecules, molecular hydrogen appears to be highly selective. It primarily targets the most reactive and damaging species like the hydroxyl radicals and peroxynitrite. This was seen clearly in the 2022 Mizutani animal study, where hydrogen-enriched water led to reduced kidney fibrosis in rats and ureteral obstruction. And in human dialysis patients, Nakayama's research showed that hydrogen-infused dialysis fluid tended to reduce oxidative biomarkers during treatment. By acting as a precision antioxidant, hydrogen doesn't interfere with the body's normal redox signaling. It just buffers the most harmful byproducts. 2. Anti-inflammatory modulation. Oxidative stress and inflammation go hand in hand. ROS can activate signaling pathways like NF-κB, which trigger the release of inflammatory cytokines. Over time, this can lead to chronic low-grade inflammation, which accelerates kidney damage. In both the animal and human studies, hydrogen appeared to reduce inflammation. In rats, this showed up as fewer inflammatory markers and less immune cell infiltration. In dialysis patients, inflammation markers like CRP trended downward over the course of treatment. Hydrogen doesn't act like a steroid or a traditional anti-inflammatory drug. Instead, it seems to modulate the immune response, reducing the kind of persistent, non-resolving inflammation that wears tissue down. 3. Support for mitochondria and autophagy. One emerging area of research is how hydrogen might help preserve mitochondrial function, especially in stressed tissues like the kidneys. Damaged mitochondria not only reduce cellular energy, but they also release signals that promote cell death and fibrosis. When autophagy, the body's internal recycling system, is impaired, these broken mitochondria pile up and make the problem worse. Ho and Shirakawa emphasize this in their review. Mitochondrial dysfunction in CKD is both a cause and a consequence of oxidative stress. Any intervention that helps maintain healthy mitochondrial turnover could theoretically slow disease progression. In animal studies, hydrogen has been shown to promote autophagy and reduce apoptosis, programmed cell death, which suggests it may be helping cells maintain their internal housekeeping systems under pressure. So what does this all mean? Hydrogen isn't a drug in the traditional sense. It doesn't push the system in one direction. Instead, it seems to work as a gentle modulator, reducing excess stress without disrupting normal function. In the context of chronic kidney disease, that matters because the kidney doesn't usually fail all at once. It declines slowly, weighed down by oxidative load, mitochondrial exhaustion, and inflammation that won't shut off. Hydrogen may not stop that process, but it may help the system resist damage longer, preserving function where and when it matters most. After walking through the science, it's important to step back and ask, what do we actually know and what's still unknown? Let's be clear. Molecular hydrogen is not a treatment for kidney failure. It's not a substitute for dialysis, medication, or managing underlying conditions like diabetes or high blood pressure. The evidence we've discussed, from Mizutani's 2022 animal study to Nakayama's observational trials in dialysis patients, offer early, encouraging signals, not clinical certainty. We don't yet have large-scale randomized controlled trials to confirm how hydrogen compares to other interventions. We also don't fully understand the optimal dose, delivery method, or treatment duration, especially for non-dialysis patients or those in earlier stages of kidney disease. That said, the emerging picture is worth paying attention to. Across multiple studies, hydrogen appears to be safe, with no known toxicity at therapeutic levels. Metabolically neutral, meaning it doesn't stress the kidneys, liver, or other organs. And biologically active, influencing oxidative stress, inflammation, and cellular energy in ways that might be highly relevant to kidney health. What makes this exciting is the gentleness of hydrogen's effect. It doesn't override systems, it supports them. That's especially valuable in the context of chronic kidney disease, where the body is already under strain and heavy-handed interventions often come with side effects. The research we've reviewed suggests that hydrogen may not need to be powerful to be useful. Sometimes the best support is subtle, helping stress systems hold the line just a little longer or bounce back just a little faster. So where does this leave us? Hydrogen isn't ready for primetime clinical adoption in nephrology. But it is ready for more investigation, and it deserves that, not because it promises a cure, but because it fits into a new kind of thinking about chronic disease. Not just treating symptoms, but targeting the drivers of cellular stress. Not just slowing damage, but preserving resilience. And not just managing disease, but supporting the body's own repair systems, quietly, consistently, and from the inside out. As we look ahead, Studies like these remind us that sometimes the most interesting answers come from the simplest places, and that even a molecule as small as hydrogen can open big questions about how we care for our most vital organs. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into kidney failure and the emerging science around molecular hydrogen. If this episode gave you something to think about, consider passing it along to someone. Next episode, we'll be diving even deeper into the topic of kidney stones. Until then, stay healthy, stay curious, and we'll catch you next time.